Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire supported by Glenlivet Books. The office of the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister has announced that Kashmiri students who celebrated Pakistan defeating India at the World Cup will be charged with sedition. Is that wise and correct, or is it a gross abuse of the law? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with one of the most illustrious former judges of the Supreme Court, Justice Deepak Gupta. Justice Gupta, let me start with a very simple question. Is it sedition to celebrate Pakistan defeating India at the World Cup?
It's definitely not sedition, but it's definitely ridiculous and ludicrous to think that this amounts to sedition.
It's not, you're saying something very important. It's not just not sedition, it's ridiculous to think it is.
Yes.
Which means that the announcement from the UP Chief Minister's office is ridiculous.
See, if they went through the various judgments on sedition, celebrated judgments, which we've discussed in an earlier interview, the Chief Minister would have been well advised not to issue such a tweet, because I think it's come a tweet or is it a statement? I'm not sure.
It's a tweet from the Chief Minister's office.
See, I don't know if they're aware of that famous case where a person shouted Khalistan Zindabad in the Sector 17 market, and the Supreme Court said this does not amount to sedition because there's no call to violence or for public disorder. How does clapping, I may not support the action. That's a different thing. Though in sports, why can't you even support the other side? That's the spirit of the game.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that if the Chief Minister himself or his advisors had bothered to look at earlier judgments from the Supreme Court, and you cited, I believe, the 1985 Balwant Singh judgment, but there are several others as well, including one by Justice Lalit as recently as June 2021.
The Vinod Dua matter. No, I'm saying nothing can be worse that was said than in Balwant Singh's case. Because that was raising slogans for Khalistan. And still when the Supreme Court says, and here people are young students, youngsters are clapping. One may not agree with them, but I think this whole process of taking sports into the political arena and making it, that our gold medalist at the Olympics, Neeraj Chopra, he faced a similar thing when he just tweeted that when the Pakistani javelin thrower came and picked up his javelin, he said, "Bhai, ye to mera javelin hai." So then there was a huge number of tweets that the Pakistan had they wanted to do something to his javelin and they wanted to take it away. And I just wanted to quote what this sportsman said, if you permit me. Neeraj Chopra said, "Sports teaches us all to live together, and it is important to know the rules of the game before commenting." I mean, where are we going?
Can I then put this to you? You very clearly said that if the Chief Minister himself or his advisor had bothered to read earlier judgments, and as you pointed out, the most crystal clear is the Balwant Singh judgment of 1985, but there's also the UU Lalit judgment in the Vinod Dua case, which is just of this year, June 2021. If they'd bothered to read this, they wouldn't have charged anyone with sedition. They'd have known it's completely wrong. So let me ask you this. In addition to being done in ignorance, is this also irresponsible of a Chief Minister?
I mean, yes, why not? When a Chief Minister passes, his office sends a tweet, which is definitely against the law of the land as laid down by the apex court of the country, then it's not a responsible statement. And then it makes it an irresponsible statement. Why? I mean, there are better things to do than charge these people for offenses which will never stand in court, and you waste public time and money, and you don't win over any hearts. You lose people, you alienate people in the process, and whereas there should be an effort to bring people who are alienated to to the mainstream. You're alienating people. These are students, 3 of them, who've got scholarships under the Pradhan Mantri scheme for Kashmiri students.
Quite right.
Now they would be, and you taking. Now, Mr. Thapar, I'd just like to add one more thing. Lots of UK citizens or Australian citizens of Indian origin cheer for India when a match is played at Lord's. What would any of us from India feel if they were charged with sedition in their respective countries? Then we would be singing a totally different tune.
You're absolutely right. And may I point this out as someone who's lived in the United Kingdom for well over 20 years, that not only do Indians and Pakistanis chant and whoop with joy for an Indian or Pakistani team when it is beating the British team, they also in British stadiums wave Indian and Pakistani flags. And no one charges them with sedition. It may not be liked, that's another matter. Norman Tebbit, when he was a minister, commented on this. But commenting is one thing, not liking it is one thing, charging with sedition is another. And I'm glad you said that in this instance, to believe that Kashmiri students celebrating a Pakistani victory over India is not sedition. You said it's ridiculous to think it's sedition, and it was irresponsible of the Chief Minister to claim it is sedition. Let me then put this to you. This has been going on, Justice Gupta, for a very long time. It's not something that suddenly happened yesterday. Even though as recently as June, July this year, Chief Justice Ramanda and Justice Chandrachud both separately have said that sedition is being misused. Both of them separately have said perhaps the court needs to define the limits of sedition. But despite that, politicians continue to use sedition, police forces use sedition regardless of the facts and circumstances. How then do we stop this continuing blatant misuse?
Mr. Thapar always felt that sedition has no place in a civilized democracy. But having said that, and I've also said the view that in a democracy, everybody else is entitled to a point of view which is different than mine. And there would be many people who may want sedition on the statute book. But then sedition, as has been defined by the Supreme Court in various judgments, and the latest being that of Justice U. Lalit in Vinod Dua's case. But I think now the time has come where when there is a challenge to the constitutional validity of this section of sedition, where the Supreme Court must step in and in no uncertain terms lay down whether this law is constitutionally valid or not, and even if it is valid, what are its limitations, and make it very strict, and not that anybody can file a and what is happening today, some people from some group go and say that these people have raised a slogan. In fact, the college authority said that they didn't even raise any slogans. That was the first initial reaction of the college authorities. Now, without any proof, without anything, just on a hearsay of some people who were not inside the college, this is being raised.
I hear what you say, and I'm repeating it because I think it is so important. The time has come for the Supreme Court to step in and in no uncertain terms lay down if the law is valid or not. And if it is then deemed to be valid, please define precisely what are its limitations. Do you believe the Supreme Court should do this suo motu?
No, I think there is a petition already pending, where just in the petition in which, you see, because Justice Lalit had not gone into this aspect because he said that is not a matter before us. But now this matter is definitely before the Supreme Court. And therefore, I personally feel that the Supreme Court should look into. There is a petition challenging the constitutional validity of the section whereby sedition is an offense before the Supreme Court.
And should this be done expeditiously? The Supreme Court does have a habit of pushing things down the road, but are you saying this should be done expeditiously?
I'll not comment on that, Mr. Thapar, but I think that I would hope that they takes it up as early as possible.
As early as possible. One other thing, in an interview that I did with you in March, just 7 months ago, you did speak about the need for the Supreme Court to lay down guidelines. But that at the time was your second preference. In March, your first preference was that the law of sedition should be immediately abolished. Immediately abolished was the words you used. Do you stand by that position, or have you now altered your view?
This has been my consistent view for the last 20, 30 years, that offense of sedition has no place in a civilized democracy.
So just to understand, your position is, your preference is immediately abolish sedition, but if that is not being done or it's unlikely, then the Supreme Court, as soon as possible, must take up a case that is pending and itself determine the validity of the law, and if it's deemed to be valid, lay down in clear terms what are the limits and what are the guidelines around which the law must be used.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Would you be disappointed if the Supreme Court doesn't take this up expeditiously? And I'll tell you before you answer why I've put that question. You know better than me that in the 60 odd years since the Kedarnath Singh judgment read down sedition, the Supreme Court on 4 separate occasions has upheld its position, but has been ignored consistently both by state governments, the central government, and by the police. Secondly, you know that in the last 7 years, the use of sedition has increased hugely. In fact, it increased by 165% between 2016 and 2019, and even that did not prompt the Supreme Court to act. Which is why I asked the question, if the Supreme Court now doesn't take it up expeditiously, will you be disappointed?
So I think it will take it up. Why should I? Because I'm quite sure, the people who have challenged the constitutional validity can move an application and ask for early hearing. I see no reason why it should not be allowed.
Okay.
And I would expect that this matter should be taken up.
You would also expect it is taken up.
Yeah.
Let's then, before we end, come back to those Kashmiri students who celebrated a Pakistani victory over India at the World Cup. It may be distasteful to do so. It may be offensive to do so. Some people might even argue that it's plausibly immoral to do so. But is it a crime? Is it a crime to celebrate Pakistan defeating India?
See, as I said earlier, I may not agree with them celebrating such a victory because given the relation between India and Pakistan, it may not be the most wise thing to do. But that does not make it a crime. A thing may be good or it may be bad. A thing may be legal, but it's different from saying it's illegal. Legality, illegality, crime is something totally different from being good or bad. All legal actions are not necessarily good actions or moral actions. And all immoral or bad actions do not necessarily turn into illegal actions. We are governed, hopefully, by a rule of law and not by a rule of morals. Morality has different connotations in different societies, in different religions, in different times. Morals change. And we are governed, but what is the law? And the law with regard to sedition has been clearly set out in various judgments. And any constitutional authority who takes an oath to uphold the Constitution is bound to follow the law as laid down by the Supreme Court of India.
My last question, Justice Gupta, you very categorically said it may be offensive, it may not be wise to celebrate Pakistan defeating India, but it is not a crime. And as you said, all legal actions do not have to be good or moral. Therefore, I want to end by asking this to you. In addition to being charged with sedition, these students have also been charged with Section 153A, which is promoting enmity on grounds of religion. They've been charged with Section 504.
How does it promote? I mean, again, a ridiculous allegation. You don't, just because they happen to belong to a particular religion. Now, what happened, as I give you that example, what happens if Hindus in England, because England is predominantly Christian, so can you say that they are doing it to make, have they said anything against Hinduism? I don't agree with them. I think they were foolish, maybe, in celebrating it in the manner. See, and I'm talking about these Kashmiri 3 students of UP. I am not talking about some things which happened in Srinagar, which may have different connotations, where the celebrations went much beyond than just celebrating a victory. Other slogans were raised. I'm not going to talking about that. I'm only limiting my discourse here to what is said by these 3 students. In Agra, I think they were students of engineering college.
Okay, I just emphasize that you're talking specifically about the Agra case, the case that the UP Chief Minister's office tweeted about. Let me ask
others cases. Beg your pardon. Yes, beg your pardon.
These students have also been charged with Section 5051B, which is about making statements which may induce others to commit an offense against the state or against public tranquility.
See, they were celebrating. They may have been celebrating wrongly, but they were not committing an offense, and they were not inciting anybody to commit an offense. If people take offense from their actions and then commit an offense, that these people can't be charged with it.
That's very true. If someone takes offense against what they're doing and becomes violent himself, these people are not responsible.
So they're
My last question.
The other side can also raise slogans against them, say whatever they want to, but they can't be violent against them.
My last question, Justice Gupta. They've also been charged under Section 66F of the IT Act, which is apparently punishment for cyber-terrorism.
I frankly, I've not read it, but how does cyber-terrorism come into? Because I don't even think, from what I've heard, that they did anything. They didn't even tweet or anything. They were just celebrating in the hostel and raised some slogans about the victory.
So in other words, these 3 further charges are all wrong. They do not apply.
To be honest, I have not really gone into the details, but that apparently on the face of it, they don't appear to be. Right.
That's very clear. I thank you, Justice Gupta, for making time for me. I thank you in particular for the clarity with which you've answered these questions. And I want to once again make it clear that your view as a former illustrious retired Supreme Court judge is not only is this definitely not sedition, it is ridiculous to call it sedition, and it was irresponsible of the Chief Minister and or his office to have interpreted this as sedition.
The tweets are always made not by the Chief Minister, by some social media agency engaged. I mean, he can't take... it's not... That's what I mean, that it's the office of the Chief Minister which I will have to take responsibility for the irresponsible tweet.
And the other thing you said, which is very important, it may be offensive to celebrate a Pakistani victory, but it is not a crime to do so. Thank you very much, Justice Gupta. Your clarity will be of great help, although I'm not sure that you will necessarily convince those who disagree with you. Take care, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. I can normally unable to convince people anywhere. So let's leave it at that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.